This is the future of Africa. In this program, we focus on Horn of Africa's political, economic, and socio-cultural aspects. Let's share our vision, hopes, and professional critics. All views are stemmed. Stay with us. Mrteshale, welcome to this program. Mrteshale Abera was one of the senior judges of Ethiopia, former president of the Supreme Court of Oromia, and now currently he's living in UK. He left the country following the harassment he faced while he served as the president of the Supreme Court of Oromia National Regional State. Today we'll be discussing different issues with him. Welcome again, Mrteshale.
Thank you.
Yeah, as an Oromo, we have been struggling all through, and we can take into account the past 150 years, 50 years, 27 years, and the past 4 years. In spite of the struggle, we are not in a position to achieve all what we want as an Oromo. I believe that there are some considerable achievements compared to the past, actually. Yet we all are paying great price. It's really logical to look back what has happened in 1991, 1972, and 2018. So it's important to evaluate what has happened. From your experience and exposure, how do you look at the struggle of the Ormo people? Briefly, please.
Yeah, the struggle of Ormo people must be seen in the framework of what Ethiopia was about, as you just indicated. Starting, it could go back as 150 years back or 100 years. So that Ethiopia is an archaic, very fragile state, as we know. It began to take shape after independence, especially the Italian invasion, and the African independence, the fact that Ethiopia was allegedly not colonized except for that brief occupation of Italia, gave a centrist state to Ethiopia, and the emperor exploited that, and that put Ethiopia at the center stage of history, both in Africa and at the world stage for some time. Especially Emperor Haile Selassie exploited that very well. As you may know from history, in the 1960s, there was a very aggressive campaign to modernize Ethiopia. What that modernization is about has to be left to different theoreticians and historians, but in the 1960s, a very huge step was taken by Emperor Haile Selassie to introduce different legislations, both civil, criminal, maritime, and what have you. Even the constitution was meant to be imported from Japan. A huge effort has been underway to make Ethiopia a nation, a country, an empire state. Did it succeed? It is quite difficult to say so, but the emperor tried to consolidate power, to command power globally, and on the stage of Africa, there is no question about it. Underneath that, many nations and nationalities had to be buried. That is what happened over the past 100 years. As far as I am concerned, my memory goes, that's what happened over the past 60 years. I was not there 60 years ago. I was a very small child when the 1974 revolution erupted. The king was like God. He created his image, and he imposed and projected himself like that, and he succeeded. The rest, the emperor was God sent. The church, especially the Orthodox Church, was the anointing and the only religion around there, and the rest religion, people, nations, and nationalities were completely rejected and replaced with one nation, one identity, one ethnic group. The rest had to be buried. That was what has going on since 1974. And in 1974, a little light shone on the nations and nationalities. Somehow, for example, Oromo language began to be spoken, to be written with. That was one significant achievement, as you may remember. And the land that was taken from the people was returned back from the landlords, semi-kings that were assigned in different regions, especially Oromia and the southern. So that was quite relief. But that revolution that was ignited by the student movement, the ballet movement, the Gojam peasants movement, was completely hijacked by the students themselves. If you look at it closely, those who fought, especially in the student movement, finally tried to hijack it from their fathers, especially the EPRP, believed that power belonged to them. They began to kill, and you remember the Red Terror and White Terror. And those people are still in power and still killing. And in that project, if you look back and rewind history, what happened then is happening today, and it is orchestrated by the people who were running that project, the Red Terror, White Terror. So in 1974. In 1974, the socialist government came championing change, but that change was never happened. The people became the owner of, semi-owner of their land for some time, but serfdom was introduced. Derg became the owner of the land, and the people who began to use the land become serfs for the socialist regime. And the suffering of the people for over the 17 years under the Mengistu regime was so brutal. We remember people were killed, and killing was very normal, and it was broadcasted and it was boasted about. And we feared the government as our number one enemy, and we lived that life, and it was very frightening. And it is during that that I went to police college, I graduated as a police officer, and I remember what things look like. Everything is tight, and security was dangerous, and you can't breathe a word without being seen, watched, and that is what you feel, and that was what it was. 1974, the revolution, as I said, is hijacked, and the military had to become the despot, the oppressor of the people, and this brought about a change in 1991. In 1991, a marvelous change happened, especially in principle, the 1995 constitution. First, transitional government, the transitional government was installed, and they brought about different changes. Recognition was given to nations, nationalities, states were formed out of it, nations were formed out of it, like such as Oromia, the Oromo language, the Oromia regional states, what we see today, and it was a big step, and still that is something that we have to appreciate and consider as a change. It is a very big step, a very huge leap. And behind it was this 1995 constitution. It was quite progressive, probably one of the best constitutions ever in the history of Africa, leave alone in Ethiopia. But its implementation was completely crippled, intentionally crippled by EPRDF. And what was happening was very clear. The constitution declares the sovereignty of the people, which should be expressed and demonstrated through fair and free election. But there was no free and fair election, and openly, and I worked in the system, and I knew that, and I can say that I was able to see the internal dynamics of politics then. And the officials used to say that the constitution belonged to us. You can't question, challenge our power based on the principles enshrined in that constitution. It is who formed it, and you cannot use it to challenge us. That is what is often said by small cadres to big cadres in the government at regional and federal level. They didn't see how suppression could trigger that sort of movement, and it finally triggered that movement especially after 2012, and along the way. Then it could stop. And what happened in 2018, you know, and that change was again hijacked. And where we are now, Ethiopia is in a very even a deeper crisis now under the current government led by Dr. Abiy. Others some call him Colonel Abiy. Either way, he became the worst despot in Africa. That has never been seen in the history of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is in a very difficult position as we speak. So that is what it is.
Thank you, Mr.TESHALE. I think that's a very deep analysis and professional. And we have looked at the imperial time and then the military government, social oriented, and the 27 years of leadership, for that matter. And I believe that the Constitution of 1995 was a result of the struggle of nations and nationalities. And I do agree that particularly some of the aspects of it are very important, the result of a long time struggle. There are people who tend to stand against it. There are people who are requesting for modification. But personally, I believe that most aspects of it is very important and the result of the struggle of nations and nationalities. Now, let me take you to a bit the current situation. Given this situation, we have been struggling all through until 2018, whereby promises and hopes for transformation were there. If you look at it now, how do you evaluate the current political, economic, and diplomatic situation of the country? I discussed this with Dr. Awal Alo, and I wonder whether we have similar reflections or not on that or not. From your experience, how do you look at this, the political, economic, and diplomatic situation of the country at this stage?
Yeah. 2018 was an opportunity for the government to reform itself without shedding a sweat. It was a very big opportunity, and the level of acceptance of people and the readiness of people to help the government to implement the achievements, especially based on the Constitution of 1995, was quite immense. The government refused to do that. They just wanted not to make the wheel all over again, but to go back to the 20th century, the 1980s. So that completely put the entire system out of balance. The international community, as you may remember, welcomed the new government, if at all it is new. It is not new. It weren't new, but everybody wanted to see change. Because of that, there was kind of enthusiasm and hope, and people were eager to see something, but it wasn't there. It wasn't there from the start, but many people just didn't want to see because of, I think, the trauma of 30 years under EPRDF. Wanted to change, and sometimes wanted to see what they wanted to see. It wasn't there, actually. But it was possible to force the government to implement that, the change that was anticipated. Because of that, the current political system, the current government became the worst of all. There is no question about it. The judiciary is not working. The economic situation in Ethiopia is disastrously crumbling, as we see. If you see the foreign currency reserve and the exchange rate and the value of birr, it is falling day by day. And it reminds me, when you talk about it, something I got the chance to visit Zimbabwe in 2005 for sharing some their experience on dispute resolution, especially how they use the community level dispute resolution system. They have got a wonderful system. But when we went there, we were asked to change our dollar at airport. We had $100, which we should exchange at the airport because there is a money exchange, and we had to change some amount of money for some of our needs during our stay, and we have to buy. We have to be given a plastic bag to carry it, the exchange. We changed it. We exchanged $100 for about 900 something million, and on a black market in the city, it is more than 1,600,000, something like that. Just $100, and it is 70,000 Zimbabwean dollars that you eat your lunch. And the Ethiopian money has gone that far, and it's going towards that. And you can't pay, you can't buy a paper for 10,000 Zimbabwean dollar. The Ethiopian money is going towards that direction, and people are living. And sometimes it is just difficult to anticipate, to understand how people are living. This is taking the country somewhere dangerous, when people can't eat, and when they are desperate. What is going to happen is very dangerous. Ethiopian people are very decent. West, south, center, periphery. But when you deprive them the right to live, when the economic situation is so in crisis and unfairly, some are rich and some are completely poor, and the economic situation and the relationship, the relationship between people, the rich and poor, is built that way. The rich are being rich, the more greedier, and becoming very oppressive and favored, and the rest living a hell. This is very dangerous. So that is it as far as economy is concerned. Politics is completely not working. The judicial system doesn't have any clue about what is going on in the prosecutorial or the police system. They can't read each other. They don't listen to each other. And the judiciary is completely zero, for example, in Oromia, especially in Oromia and the rest of the region. Politics doesn't work without the state machineries read each other. It doesn't work in Ethiopia now, especially Oromia and Tigray is independent state. Oromia is semi-independent. That is what is politics about nowadays. The economic situation we talked about, and diplomatically, Ethiopia is zero now. International community completely rejected Abiy, and they treat him like a baby, a boy, not a prime minister. So wherever you went, nobody values the Ethiopian officials and considers them as a valued friend or colleague. Ethiopia has always been like that, because when, as a politician, you don't have the legitimacy of the people, then you beg the legitimacy of international communities. That is how the Ethiopian politics has been built for so long. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the voice of the people. All they cared was about the West democracies, what the Americans felt and what the British government felt and what the Western democracies felt was very important. That was the case during the Derg. What the leaders of Russia, USSR felt was very important to Mengistu than what people were talking about and what they were concerned about. So the Ethiopian politics has always been like this, and it continues to be like that, and that is going to be the end of it, unless Ethiopian political system, the economic system is reset and meant to understand and gain its legitimacy and its productivity from the people. It is not going to work.
Great reflection, Mr. Teshale, and I think that's what we have discussed last time with Dr. Awolalo. I'm not going to repeat myself, and but I see some important aspects of the economy fueling into the crisis going on. I describe them as corruption, perhaps inflation, and famine and drought all throughout the country. Essentially, corruption is getting normal and everywhere in the country. There is no accountability, as you know, whatsoever the case. Land is becoming the main source of corruption. Drought and famine is everywhere rampant. You may look at what's happening in Borana, Guji, Harar, Bali lowlands, and the like. As you have said, inflation is skyrocketing. And I believe that these things are adding fuel to the crisis. How do you look at these things?
Absolutely, you are right. And corruption is built into the system called EPRDF and OPDO, especially after 2006, after Abdullah assumed power. What he did is he produced a battalion, a society of corruption, for example. If you remember, in universities, students must be nominated as members of political parties. In Oromia especially, that was the case. And unless you get recruited at university as a member, you won't get a job. So it is not your academic credentials that gives you a job. It is not your competence in engineering that makes you an engineer who is meant to build roads and buildings. It is how long or how deep you are in the political party while at a uni. You were either a university student or a lecturer by then, and probably you might have a better understanding of what it is.
Sure.
But after 2006, in 2006, there was a sense of kind of sense of belief in 2005 election, and the government decided to open up the election to anyone else. But they realized that people didn't choose. The people are ready to reject them. When they realize that, they become brutal. And after that, in 2006, 2007, there was a very serious campaign and decision to nominate as many educated people into the party. But what has happened is they nominated completely liberalized, diluted students who never care and who shouldn't care about what education is about, what profession is about, what honesty, integrity is about, but power, political power to assume offices. These people were, Oromia was drenched, and every region was drenched by this kind of graduates. That is how corruption developed, and it became the systematic problem afterwards. Before that, there was some level of professionalism, especially graduates were somehow disciplined, somehow different from the rest. When they graduate and get job based on their credentials and their academic performance, it was better. But under the government of Abadullah and afterwards, if you remember, corruption completely take root. And it is very difficult to do otherwise. Why is it that is the case? Let me explain that. This government, especially to remain in power, they committed a crime. Many people committed a crime. It is difficult to leave power now. The crime that has been committed is, as you said, not just selling land. People are killed and dragged out of prison and killed. Who is doing that? These are officials. There are police officers who are opposed to that, who has got a record of those. People see that. People know these officials. Leaving power is not a choice now. It is about life and death. So Ethiopia is in a very, Oromia and Ethiopian officials, politicians, and the people are in a kind of deadlock. You cannot.
So directly or indirectly, you are referring to issues of accountability, right?
Absolutely. Issues of accountability. You cannot hold yourself accountable when it is prison or death penalty. That is what should be feared. And this is a kind of wholesale, and everybody is involved in this kind of crime. So the crime that has been committed over the past 30 years has been committed by these people. And there was no plan as to how this should be addressed. People seem to have given a kind of pardon, kind of blanket pardon in 2018. It appears that way if you closely look at what happened in 2018. But that is gone now. What has happened after 2018 is even worse than what happened over the past 27 years before that. The crime that has been committed over since 2018 is far more exceeds what in terms of gravity and depth. You can't compare, and the quota is far more than that. The quota of killing, the quota of corruption, the depth of crimes that has been committed over the past 3-4 years since 2018, it is quite genocidal, and the genocide is going to be the center of discussion now.
Thanks so much, and we'll be looking at inflation and perhaps the third element later on, but as you have clearly stated, corruption is really deep in Ethiopia. And I want to add one point. When I was there, like 6-7 years back, there was a program on Ethiopian television that did focus on like 54 higher officials in one of the regions did have what you call forgery, a fake document, and in the other region, like 20% of the total employees of the government having fake documents. Again, of that, 68% was national, I mean, health professionals. They were health professionals. So it is sad. It goes deep into the level of academic corruption. So I think that much is enough. And now I would like to take you to your profession. It's shocking that really to witness what is stated in the Constitution, the rule of law and justice have been extremely undermined in Ethiopia, particularly over the past 4 years. As you said, mass arrests, mass killings, jailings, and mistreatment and hate speech are everywhere and common. I myself could be witness for that because I have gone through that hard time. Even when the courts pushed me out of jail, the police didn't allow me to go out, and even the federal attorney general wrote a letter for me, a 3-page letter, saying that this person is free. I mean, there is no crime, so he should go home without any bail. But they refused to do that, and I was there for over 6 months. And now still there are people who are there in prison for long. Even the court has decided for their release 5-6 times. Being a person of that kind, a profession of, I mean, that field, how do you describe this? It's really extremely sad to observe this kind of situation in countries like Ethiopia in general and in Oromia in particular. How do you evaluate, please? Can you compare with perhaps your time and the current situation and tell us something about it?
Yeah, look, during the Derg, they won't bring you to the court. You will be killed, and the government boasts about it because you are anti-revolutionary and you deserve to die. That is what they believed foolishly, and they were responsible for that. The EPRDF tried to create a kind of pseudo-judiciary, and they created a pocket. There is just one court. The Derg has got, for example, a martial court for it to handle some people. When it wants to kill people, and then they will be taken there, and the trial is quite defective, and that's what happens. Or you will be killed by the government, and it is called revolutionary measure. And under EPRDF, there is one court, but there are special courts, especially for Oromos. But there is still trial. you will be tried, but the system is rigged and you will be sentenced. But if that court releases, you will be released anyway.
At
Now
least the
it's
process
different.
is there.
The process is there. You will be released. You know that the judge is corrupt in some situations, especially the Oromos. There were special courts that were treating Oromo politicians for the past 20-something years under EPRDF. And they were unfair, very clearly known it was unfair. But their decision is final. They either sentence you to whatever sentence they want they want you to be sentenced with, or you'll be released. If you are released, you'll be released. And if you are sentenced and after that service, you'll be released again. But under the Abiy government, you won't be released, even if the court says so. And there are different decisions, not 1, 2, 3 decisions against, just regarding 1, 2 individuals. Not 2 individuals, many individuals we know were acquitted. Acquittal is there is no prosecution evidence against you and you don't even need to defend yourself. So go home, that is what it is. Some of them were not even accused by the prosecution. Prosecution sees the case and they decide there is no case, please release them. Sometimes the prosecutors ask the court to help them give that decision because they have got their bosses from behind, because the prosecution, the office in principle belongs to the executive system, the executive branch. So sometimes they need some push from the judiciary. That is what is happening now. And even after the judicial system, the court, the judges decide that somebody has to be released, the police won't. And this thing has been going on and on and on for so long. It's not one individual,
And
not two individuals.
in principle, can police refuse the decision of the court?
In principle, no one would stop the decision of the court, whether it is a judge at lower echelon or Supreme Court. Decision of the court must be respected. That is what we call rule of law. It doesn't matter if somebody is authorized to make some decision, that decision has to be respected. At every level, it doesn't have to be a judge. If decision is given as per the law of the land, it has to be respected. If at your office you decide, you make some decision against or in favor of your secretary, that has to be respected. That is what the rule of law is about. You cannot be arbitrary. You are not entitled to be arbitrary. Mm-hmm. So that is, when we talk about rule of law, it is not just what the judge decides. It is about the process. If the process is there, it has to be observed. It has to be applied. We talk about the constitution and constitutional law, but that is the culture that develops from that very little activities in small offices. But nowadays, even courts, judges, after trial make decisions, and after hearings make decisions, and you won't get released. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you are dragged from the prison and beaten and tortured, and the courts couldn't do anything. Nowadays, we saw when judges who make these kinds of decisions are dragged and arrested and tortured themselves. We saw that in many places in Oromia, for example. So
and some left their offices.
Some left their offices. They are lucky. Some were beaten, arrested themselves. We have got a list of judges, prosecutors were beaten up, were tortured, were arrested, just because they made unfavorable decision to the government. And the district official comes and drags you. That was happening sometimes. And I have my own experience while I was a judge in Supreme Court, but it was possible to challenge those officials, corner them and make them sweat. I know that. For example, in Jaldu, in different parts of Hararge, I have that experience, and it was possible to talk to officials. When they do that, you can make them blink. Now you can't at all. You can't talk about rule of law, even during the brutal EPRDF regime. But now you can't. You are yourself under a threat of being prosecuted, beaten up, and imprisoned. This happened in Bale, in Shoa, in Western Shoa, here, many places. A prosecutor was himself harassed and arrested in Southern Shoa, for example, around Fiche, during the height of the arrest of OLF officials recently, about 2-3 years ago. And people are tortured officially in mass, killed in prison, and you are dragged out of prison. Just during the Derg period, it was happening like that. Prisoners who are legally in prison should be protected and their rights protected. If you are imprisoned, you have some rights, but they just drag you and kill you and just throw you on the street. That is what is happening in Oromia. That is the depth of the crime now. That is what we can't talk about rule of law and things like that. That is why this government cannot be trusted to implement accountability. If accountability begins, those people who are doing this should be locked up. It is very difficult. This is not what a group of people do. That is a kind of a project. It's become the culture of the system now.
It's always great to hear from professionals and insiders, actually. That's amazing, and that is exactly what did happen. Even after the days of Hachalu, things fall apart, and everything has happened that way, and is still there. It's interesting discussion. Let me take you out of this, and let's talk about social media. It's evident that social media is, a tool that plays significant role in initiating, perhaps galvanizing and mobilizing people for change and transformation. This was exactly what has happened over from 2014 to 2018. Nevertheless, you see, unless properly handled, it might create again anarchy, chaos, and so on. What I'm observing now over the past couple of months reflects this. And I wish we give a priority for discussion based on our norm and our culture as an Oromo. What's your observation in this regard?
Yeah, I think I want to make 2 points here. First, we, the Oromos, seem to have lost our way. The Oromos listen to each other. When, in the Oromo culture, when somebody speaks, the other replies by saying, It means I follow you until you finish. And when you are done, when I am done, you continue. I have to continue doing the same you were doing while I was speaking. It means I am swallowing, chewing every bit of what we are talking about. This is called Elaf Elame. Elaf Elame. Speaking and listening. and communicating. That is the Oromo culture of doing things you discuss.
Okay, I can't hear you. I think you are muted.
What did you say?
Okay, now it's fine. Continue.
Elaf Elame. In Borana, when children begin to speak, still that what I heard is how far it is true, we have to look at it. The elders should listen.
Sure.
Because tomorrow belongs to them and they should be listened at.
Mm-hmm.
Before the kids, the parents want to eat. When food is ready, it is the kids who should eat first. We lost this way. Now we implanted a completely different and alien culture into Oromo culture. And we have got different values of this sort. Rather than reasoning with someone, trying to silence the other by making a very big noise has become a culture. This came from the struggle, during the struggle, especially during since the social media became a force of running activism, advocacy for whatever agenda you wanted. You can do whatever. You speak, just sit behind a screen and write whatever you wanted to write. But in 2014, a group of people came out and managed to control it, especially from the Oromo perspective, from the Oromo side. It was really well managed, somehow really well managed. And the TV platform, especially speaking of an Oromo from abroad, gave the opportunity to structure, to package those discussion during the 2014, 2018, and even after that for some time. But communication slowly began to break down. The government itself began to use the social media as kind of smear tactic. And many people seem to have fallen into that trap. And it is time for, as far as Oromos are concerned, to sit back, to sit down and root out this kind of culture, the hate culture, the insult culture. And you write something that is nasty, that you won't say to a white man in a white people's country, but you can say anything nasty to your fellow Oromo. It is a crime to say that when it comes to a citizen where you live, especially in the diaspora, but it is okay to do it on your fellow Oromo. That has to stop as far as Oromo is concerned. But not only that, what you've been asking is how social media is generally used. Social media has been used by the Prime Minister and his office and by the priestess and very radical forces are working around him as a kind of very effective platform to preach hate. Even churches used it in the social media, video, and there are many programs on social media that has been preaching hate, including churches, including offices installed in the office of the Prime Minister. Wow. So this is related to what decency is all about. The decency, there is no little decency in the Ethiopian government. They just lost a little moral required to run politics. That lack of accountability, that level of arrogance, not only make them the preachers of hate speech and using media as a tool of suppression and advance genocide, but it makes them weak in controlling it. The government can't control unless it is accountable. The government is not accountable, and it is not considered accountable, not even considered as a government of the people. So without having that legitimacy, you don't have the moral high ground, you don't have the moral authority to regulate anything. So it is time for the people themselves to think about it. The scholars, the media should sit back and think about it. Because if the government fails, you just can't say that the government fails and I can't do anything, and you just can't sit back and wait for a disastrous tide to come, to wipe you out, to wipe the generation out. That is what is happening. And if you let the people hate each other and use social media to do that, to promote it, no one is safe. So in this kind of scenario, it is the media, the scholars, the different civic societies, and even the political organizations, especially the oppositions, that should step up and do what the government is supposed to do.
I think the social media, which is used by the government, can be controlled or can be supervised. But basically what I'm talking is the social media where people are using here abroad, particularly the diasporas, and I think we need to rethink about it. If something stands against the unity of the Oromo people, I think we need to stop using it. I mean, we have to use it for good, not for creating crack among the people. That's how I state it for now. We'll have more discussion in the future. Now, let me give you a wider kind of chance. Now the nation is in crisis. Ethiopia in general and Oromia in particular. War is there, drought is there, famine is there. And inflation is, as we have discussed. In general terms, what do you advise to get out of this kind of crisis from your experience? Some suggest, for instance, a genuine national dialogue that should include all actors, a kind of participatory, open, and perhaps facilitated by independent actors. So, there is also concern with regard to Oromia. And before going to talk about Ethiopia, I think the Oromos should sit down, discuss, and create their own unity first of all. And do you see some kind of importance of dialogue among the Oromos themselves before going deep into the national dialogue?
Yeah, let me begin from the independent. There is no independence, and though there won't be independent arbitrator in this, the people who are victims of this should stand up and organize something towards having a dialogue, a genuine dialogue. The Oromos, the Kambatas, the Olaitas, the Tigres. Tigray is independent already, or a de facto independent nation. Oromia is moving towards that. And those political minds within these groupings should stand up and begin discussing with each other as to what should happen next, as to how the country should be reorganized. The country is already reorganized and reset. But that reset could be more violent because it is in the process of reset. Unless you make something nasty could happen. There is no question about it. Why I'm saying what I'm saying is I'm not just creating things. For example, Tigray is independent and there is no coming back from there. And if Tigray comes back from it, it is on a completely different arrangement. It is not going to be on the framework of pre-2018. Tigray has got its own defense. Tigray has forced to swallow that very sour experience. People were massively killed, and many were killed and thrown alive into rivers and oceans and big rivers. And what happened to the Tigray people is quite an example that Ethiopia can't be the same again. Oromia is completely different now, and it is not going to be the same again. Even if these two nations come together and discuss and invite the rest into a very genuine discussion and dialogue and discussion is important, but there is no independent international arbitrator that could solve Ethiopia's problem. Ethiopians, the nations and nationalities in that empire, should come together and quickly fix things. How and on what terms they should invite the government in power in Ethiopia is up to them now. Because from what I can see, these people, the people are more stronger than the Ethiopian central government now. The government is not in charge, not in control, and it won't be in control. It can't be in control anymore. So this is what Oromos, Tigrayans, Sidamas, Somalis should understand. The solution is in their court, it is in their hand. And they should understand that the mantle belongs to them. And the Oromos should very quickly come together. Few Oromos must come together and think about it seriously. And it is time to talk to each other and formulate something. You can't expect from the two opposition groups, OLF and OFC alone, as important as they are, they can't do anything without the people. They can't do anything without the media. The media must develop some spine, must be very clear in what it should do. You just don't keep reporting without going where you go.
Thank you so much. That's very deep reflection. And one final point. Now, thousands of people, particularly Oromos, are in prison. What do you advise as a former president of Oromia Supreme Court? In a brief manner, what do you advise the government?
Everybody should campaign for the prisoners, and it is time for documenting how many prisoners are in prison. As we said, the Ethiopian government refused stubbornly, and the Human Rights Commission is making some movement recently. And that post-mortem examination is not going to do any justice to the people who have been dragged out of prison, killed and imprisoned for years, and their livelihood completely decimated and dismantled. But we must be able to learn something from that. To do that, it is the duty, it must be the duty and responsibility of everyone to document, to report, to compile that, because we don't know how many thousands of people are in prison in Western Wallagga or Southern Oromia, in Guji Borana or Bale where security forces are doing whatever they wanted with impunity. So that is what we should do. It is not about law anymore. It is about documenting what has been breached, the rights that has been decimated, and the rights that has been breached so far. So that is what we should do.
Mr. Mrteshale, now I'm providing you a final opportunity on your last thought and advice to the people and different actors in this condition.
There is no question that Ethiopia, we especially the Oromos, are in a very serious crisis. The crisis is too big, and people are saying that genocide is on the rise, or we are already in that realm. This is very frightening, and everybody, the media, as I already said, the media, intellectuals, and the civic society, and the political, especially the opposition, and people working in the government who could make some difference should think about it. And it is possible to reverse it. It is possible to stop it. Unless we stop it, it is not just an end of what is called Ethiopia. It could be very disastrous in that region. And Ethiopia could end disastrously, could be in a very disastrous and dangerous place unless something is done on time. And it is not too late to do. It is possible to do something, and we should think about this. That is my message.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mrteshale. With this, we conclude our discussion for today with Mr. Mrteshale, former president of Oromia Supreme Court, on political, economic, and diplomatic issues of Ethiopia and Oromia. I trust you have enjoyed our program. For those of you who would like to share your vision, hope, and professional critics, the door is open. Please contact me through my Facebook. My name is Dr. Hussein Kader. See you next time. This is the future of Africa. In this program, we focus on Horn of Africa's political, economic, and socio-cultural aspects. Let's share our vision, hopes, and professional critics. All views are esteemed. Stay with us.